And now I am just going to start us off by introducing our first speaker, is Marc, Director of the National Holocaust Centre and Museum. Thank you, Marc.
Thank you very much, Alex. Welcome everybody that's taken the effort to log in. We're grateful to have you. I want to start by thanking all the people who have made this exhibition possible. We and our partners are really proud of it. There's never been a more important time, well, hasn't been for decades, for Holocaust education. So to be able to join forces and do something which I hope you'll agree when you see it is immersive and meaningful is a good thing. So viva la collaboration. So the people that we'd like to thank, first of all, are the Jewish Museum of Greece, our international partner, who have provided some absolutely wonderful stories, which you'll see. We're also very grateful to the people who have financially made this possible, and that's IRA, the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, the Leon Grieman Foundation, so thanks to everyone there, and to Ruth Ann Lenger in particular, the Arts Council England, and the Cecil Rosen Foundation. I'd also like to thank the web designer builders who created the experience for us, Rhapsody Media, who have done an absolutely spectacular job, both in terms of the graphic and the interaction design. I'd like also to thank Emma Gray, who has project managed throughout the process, multiple stakeholders, lots of aggro, and come up trumps. So thank you very much, Emma. We'd also like to thank everybody who participated in all the workshops and gave us feedback and helped us iteratively improve the site. So Oscar acceptance thank yous over with. And now to the more interesting, arguably, part of it. I'm definitely going to introduce one guest speaker. I might have a special guest speaker to introduce as a second one if we can get hold of him. So let him start anyway by introducing somebody really special to launch this project, John Hajdu. John, as many of you will know, is a Hungarian Holocaust survivor and was a refugee to this country. And when the Nazis forced his family out of their home and into the Budapest ghetto, John, who was only 7 years old, I might say, took his teddy bear with him and still has that teddy bear today. And we'll be hearing why that is so significant. So it seems only fitting to start with John to highlight what's in the microsite exhibition itself, the importance of artifacts and objects, given that it is indeed Refugee Week. So what I'm going to do now is hand over to John, who is going to tell us a bit about himself, and then I hope there'll be some time for a couple of questions at the end. John.
Thank you, Marc, and thank you for asking me to speak to you this afternoon. As you heard, my name is John Hajdu. I was born in April 1937 in Budapest, Hungary, into a middle-class Jewish family. My grandfather and father were both directors of insurance companies, and my mother was a bookkeeper. We lived a comfortable, peaceful, and relatively safe life in part of Budapest, which was well known for the large number of Jewish families living there. Around 400,000 Jews lived in Hungary, of whom 200,000 lived in the capital, which is about 20% of the population of Budapest. Hungary is a small country in Eastern Europe with a total population of 10 million, compared to London, which is about 9 million. Due to the pressure from the popular far-right anti-Semitic fascist party, modeled on the Nazi party in Germany, the Hungarian government decided in 1939 to prohibit Jews from running their own companies. This was the first sign that the lives and movements of the Jews was becoming much more restricted. In 1941, Hungary entered the war, allied to Nazi Germany, and in a remarkably short time, everything changed. By 1945, many anti-Jewish laws were passed by parliament, which, for example, forbade marriage or sexual relationships between Jews and non-Jews, and excluded Jews from various professions. From that time, life for the Hungarian Jewish population became more and more dangerous. In 1943, forced labor camps for Jewish men were set up all over the country, and my father was taken to such a place. They were made to undertake heavy physical labor and given very little food. They were treated badly, some became ill, and many died. As a result, my mother, like many others in a similar situation, now had to look after me and our home on her own just when I was starting school at the age of 6. In March 1944, the Germans occupied Hungary with the collaboration of the Hungarian government and marched into Budapest. And on the 5th of April, the Yellow Star order was given. This meant that all Jews had to wear a 6-pointed yellow star on their clothing as a mark of identification, and resulted in constant abuse and even beatings by members of the far-right Hungarian Nazi Party. On the 15th of June 1944, we were ordered to leave our home and had to move into a designated Yellow Star block of flats, leaving our flat to a non-Jewish neighbor. This was just one way of confiscating Jewish property. I was 7 years old. These blocks of flats were identifiable by a yellow star on the front entrance. We were only allowed out for a maximum of 2 hours each day, which was spent mainly in queuing for basic items of food. There was no medical care available. By this time, Jewish bank accounts were also frozen. We were no longer allowed to visit parks, cinemas, hotels, or restaurants. Shortly thereafter, the deportation of all Jews began. In October 1944, after the roundup of the Jewish men had been accomplished, it was the turn of the women. The far-right Hungarian Holocaust Party, working with the Germans, was going from block to block, searching each flat, herding together all the Jewish women and children in the courtyard, giving them just a few minutes to say goodbye before they were taken away. On the 13th of October, this included my mother. My aunt, who was staying with us, grabbed me and rushed me across the corridor, begging a non-Jewish neighbor to hide us in his cupboard. Fortunately, he agreed, though he knew his life would have been in great danger had we been discovered. This is one day I shall never forget. Looking back, who would have thought that I would live through the German occupation, be persecuted for being a Jew, hide in a cupboard, which unquestionably saved my life, while my mother was taken away to a concentration camp, that after hiding, my aunt and I would be forced to go and live in the ghetto in the most inhuman conditions. The ghetto was a designated, a closed area set aside for Jews only. It was surrounded by a wall. A small number of gates were guarded by the army. Those Jews who were not taken to concentration camps were forced into about 290 buildings, where at least 20 people lived in each overcrowded flat and had to survive on very little food. Water had to be brought up in buckets. There was no medicine. There were no cleaning materials, and no rubbish or waste was collected. Dead bodies lay piled up on the pavements, many of whom had died of starvation or diseases. At the same time, the buildings were under constant bombardment by the Soviet Air Force, and we often had to hide in the cellar. By this time, the advancing Soviet troops had surrounded Budapest and were on the point of entering the capital. On the 17th of January 1945, these troops arrived and freed us just minutes before the ghetto was about to be blown up by the retreating Germans. They found around 3,000 bodies. The siege of Budapest lasted 100 days and the town was in ruins. And this is another day I shall always remember. My aunt and I left in a dazed condition and entered a world we hardly recognized. All the bridges had been blown up. Most of the houses were damaged or on fire or simply demolished. We found out from a surviving friend that my father and my uncle had escaped to neighboring Romania, where the language spoken was Hungarian. We had no choice but to follow them there, as we had lost everything. My mother told me later that when she was taken away, she was forced to march around 30 kilometers a day, sleeping on the ground in the snow and giving hardly anything to eat. Eventually, they arrived in Mauthausen, which was one of the major concentration camps set up by the Germans in Austria. Miraculously, she survived in unheated barracks with hardly any food or water in a camp infested with lice. She sustained several beatings, her ribs were broken, her teeth were smashed, she suffered from dehydration and never fully recovered physically or mentally. She was freed by the American Army on the 4th of May 1945, being one of only 5,000 survivors out of a total of 16,000. She was taken to a hospital and after recovering was able to return to Budapest. It took her some time to find out from a friend that my aunt and I, together with my father and uncle, were in Romania, so she had no option but to follow us there. Her incredible return from the dead was a huge surprise and a source of great happiness to us, but it also created great confusion, especially for my father, who believed that my mother had perished and had started a new relationship with a local lady. When my mother arrived and found out what happened, she felt that she had no choice but to take me away and return to Budapest and divorce my father. So in August 1945, we had to start again. My mother managed to find a small one-bedroom flat, found work as a carer, and I went back to school. By this time, the People's Democratic regime had been established in Hungary. This was, in fact, a communist dictatorship controlled by the Soviets. Everything, including the newspapers and the radio, was controlled by the party. There were spies everywhere, watching and listening. People disappeared at night. Life was hard. We had very little money and had to survive on basic, simple food, which was monotonous and unhealthy. I could not go to university as I was from a middle-class background and was, of course, Jewish, as this was still a black mark under the Soviets. Not having a choice, I ended up going to the Highway and Railway Technical College only because we knew one of the teachers. This way of living could not go on much longer. People were fed up and were looking to find a way out. By October 1956, the Hungarian students had had enough and presented a 16-point manifesto asking for the formation of an independent Hungary. This was the main reason for the subsequent uprising. The initial victory of the people on the 23rd of October 1956 was followed by the brutal revenge of the Soviet army a few days later. On the 25th of October, I was among 200,000 people who gathered in front of the Parliament building to celebrate a new beginning. I found out later that over 300 demonstrators were gunned down by the Soviet troops who surrounded the square all the time. Pieces of clothing, shoes, and pools of blood were still seen everywhere in the square, and this became known as the Bloody Thursday. And this is yet another day I shall never forget. The fighting continued, but by the morning of the 4th of November, the Soviet troops were in control. Over 2,500 Hungarians were killed, and thousands fled the country. The city was in ruins yet again. By now we heard that many Hungarians were escaping to Austria, and I took the decision with my mother and a friend that we had no future in Hungary, and the only answer was to escape to find a better life. Who would have thought that I would live through Hungarian Revolution in October 1956, and that I would escape with my mother from living under a barbaric communist regime with nothing but a small bag of food and my teddy, which I still have. Here we are. I will never forget the journey to the border on the 21st of November, in the middle of a very cold winter, through a night, crawling through mud, over canals, avoiding tanks, searchlights, minefields, and border guards. I was lucky. Many others did not make it and were either captured or shot. Miraculously, I crossed the border into Austria at 2:30 a.m. after walking 25 miles. We were welcomed by volunteers with hot drinks and food and shelter for the night. And this is another day I shall always remember. Next morning, I was taken by train to a refugee camp near Innsbruck and had to rely on complete strangers to give me shelter, clothing, and food. After having arranged to be transferred to Vienna, I queued outside the British Embassy and managed to get one of the last permits to emigrate to England. We were given 2 hours to get to the railway station and take the train to Ostend in Belgium, and from there, the boat to Dover. On arrival in Dover on the 6th of February 1957, we were taken by train to Cannock Chase in the north of England and were housed in barracks in a disused army camp. After a few weeks, I was moved to an old stately home near East Grinstead, where at last I could recover, but I knew that the next step had to be to go to London and to start a new life. Who would have thought that arriving in this country in February 1957, aged 20, with nothing, knowing nobody, speaking very little English, I would be accepted and helped to start a new life by various organizations, learn new customs, try to assimilate as quickly as possible, go to school again and study in a language I was not fluent in, and pass exams in English. Eventually, after many years in various jobs in several hotels, including waiter, porter, kitchen help, receptionist, and in the sales office, I became director of international sales for one of the largest hotel companies in this country, arranging for thousands of overseas visitors to come to England. At the same time, I was appointed acting chair of the London Tourist Board, chairman of the Hotel Sales Managers Association, and received the British Tourist Authority's campaign medal for services to incoming tourism. Who would have thought that I would settle down here in London, marry in 1972, and have a lovely family with 2 children and 4 grandchildren? I'm proud of my contribution to our society as a magistrate in the adult, youth, and licensing courts for many years, and being chair for the last 21 years of one of the largest residents' associations in the borough of Haringey. I'm proud of my work with the Metropolitan Police, and in 2010, I received an award as the most outstanding volunteer within the criminal justice system in Haringey, and in 2019, a Metropolitan Police Commendation for commitment and professionalism. I'm also very proud to be able to tell you that I was recognized by Her Majesty the Queen with the award of MBE in the 2020 New Year Honours. And who would have thought that I would be here talking to you after 65 years, after surviving the Nazi terror, the Soviet regime, and escaping from Hungary, to tell you that with lots of hard work, perseverance, optimism, and determination, I did it. I succeeded. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Thank you.
Hallelujah.
Whoever said that, I second that emotion. Hallelujah. John, you've clearly not only survived awful things, but you've thrived, and I salute you. For everybody who's watching, that is, of course, a very compressed version of John's story. He told it rather well. I'd encourage you to take the opportunity to hear the full fat version wherever you can. And to read his book, shameless plug.
On the web, free of charge.
Question. Got time for what?
We can't hear you.
I think the question I'd like to ask you is this. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
You can hear me.
Yep.
It's Refugee Week. We've seen this year Ukrainians trying to get to this country as refugees from the terrible plight over there. And we're seeing in some instances that as soon as they come, they get abuse from people over here when they arrive. So for you, in that context, what's it like to be a refugee?
Well, when I first became a refugee going across to Austria, obviously I was overwhelmed by the support, the help I was given by the Austrian people. To be arriving in a country with nothing and suddenly to be given food and clothing was a very strange and humbling experience. I was 19 years old at the time. And it took me some time to understand what it all meant to me. Maybe I didn't really understand it at the time. So when the second time that happened, and I came over to this country, and again, I was supported by many organizations, including the Jewish Refugee Committee, which, by the way, gave me £10 to go and buy a suit at Burton's. And that just gives you an example of how and what they did. They helped me to find a place to live in. And they regularly kept in touch with me and my mother to make sure that we are not lost and that we have a future. So in a way, being a refugee in this country was not a wonderful thing, but it was a way to find my way forward.
Well, you clearly made it work for you. I'm going to be very naughty and seek forgiveness rather than permission, because I'm asking you a very quick second question, which you've got to tell us quickly, though, please, if you can. Just tell us why the teddy bear is so important to you.
Well, as I showed you before, that's where he is. I had him since I was 3 years old. I remember having him when I was, well, I don't remember when I was 3 years old, but I know I had it with me. And of course, he accompanied me from our flat to the Yellow Star House through the ghetto, through escaping. I had him in my pocket all the time. And of course, when under the Soviet regime, we escaped from Budapest with the teddy, with me. And I have him now sitting on my desk. And every time I look at him, it reminds me of the good and the bad things, what I have been through. So it's an inspiration, but it's also an example of how something like this can change your life, and how important it is to have something to remember what happened to you.
Makes sense. John, thank you very much indeed. God bless you, and thank you for all that you do.
Thank you.
Turning now to another special guest, I'm delighted to introduce Enver Solomon. Enver is the Chief Executive of the Refugee Council, an organisation, as I'm sure most of you know, that's for 70 years has helped and supported refugees to rebuild their lives and champions the rights of refugees. Enver, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me, and it's a real pleasure to be here. What I want to talk about is about past and present and the parallels. I think the website is really remarkable in terms of how it tells such powerful stories through the objects that were so important to those 4 individuals set out on the website. We've just heard from John about his very important object, his teddy bear, but also his past and his story. And it's the stories of the past through the objects that are set out on the website, through the journeys that those 4 individuals went on, and looking at some of the issues that are highlighted through that we can draw really important, highly significant parallels with the present. And I'm just going to touch on a few. They're by no means exhaustive, but I think they're extremely significant. So the first one I'm going to focus on is the point about having to take dangerous journeys as a consequence of circumstances that an individual has no control of. If you look at Julie and the story that's set out on the website, and the dangerous journey that she had to take from Austria, and the risks that she took as a consequence of having to take that journey, not knowing what was going to happen to her, not knowing whether she would be safe, not knowing whether she would make it to her chosen destination. The parallels are all too familiar today. We have people who are fleeing all parts of the world, whether that's Afghanistan, and we know the dangers of Afghanistan, the persecution that the Taliban imposes on so many people. We know about the conflict and dangers in Syria. We know about conflicts and dangers in other parts of the world, whether that's in Eritrea, the persecution meted out by the regime in Iran, and of course, Ukraine. We've seen the images on our screens, the powerful images of our screens of what people have been through in Ukraine. And if people have to take dangerous journeys today, like Julie did, and the story set out on the website all those years and decades ago, they are treated with a huge degree of hostility by this current government out of its own choosing. It's decided that individuals that have to take these so-called dangerous journeys that are called irregular journeys are actually illegal, because they've had to pass through other countries, they've had to put their lives at risk, they've had to ultimately reach the UK, invariably now by taking dangerous journeys on flimsy vessels over the Channel. In the eyes of the UK government, they are illegal for having to take a very dangerous journey through no fault of their own, because the government is saying that if you have to take a so-called irregular journey, you are an illegal immigrant. It's chosen that language, it's chosen to enshrine that now in legislation, and it could result in imprisonment for up to 4 years. If Julie was alive today and she didn't have the option of coming to the UK on a safe sponsored route by the UK government and had to take a dangerous journey, she would be criminalised. Let me just leave that thought with you on that particular theme of having to take a dangerous, illegal journey, irregular journey to the UK, whereby Julie would be deemed a criminal in the eyes of the British state. The second theme is a very powerful theme of family separation. And if you look at Ada's story on the website and the trauma of the separation from her mother Raina, and how it impacted on their relationship long term, and how they struggled to repair their relationship as a result of that separation and the trauma of that family separation, of being separated, a daughter and mother, in such a brutal way that it turned their relationship entirely upside down and almost destroyed it. Again, that is not uncommon today. There are Afghans here in the UK as we speak who had to leave their close family members behind. They're unable to bring their close family members with them to the UK because of the highly restrictive family reunion rules that this government has chose to put in place. Again, we're working with Afghans who are stuck in limbo in hotels across the country. And the biggest trauma that they face is the trauma of family separation. The trauma of knowing that their very close loved ones are stuck in Afghanistan, that they don't know what's happening to them, that they don't know whether they'll ever see them again, that they don't know whether they'll ever be reunited with their family and be able to have a positive, loving relationship with their nearest and dearest family members. That is the reality of Afghans today. It was the reality for Ada all those years ago. She was able to be reunited with her mother, Raina, but the trauma of separation had long-term damage on their relationship. Today, the parallel is that so many families are ripped apart as a consequence of the refugee story and the refugee journey. But unfortunately, far too many as a consequence of highly restrictive rules, immigration rules, that the government chooses to put in place, far too many are unable to be united with their loved ones. They're unable to have the experience that Ada had of being reunited with her mother. My next parallel is the parallel around physical and emotional trauma that it has on people who become refugees. The stories on the website speak of high degrees of trauma, of high degrees of distress, of anxiety, of people having to face extraordinary adversity and overcome that by showing extraordinary resilience. But as a consequence, not surprisingly, having extraordinary scars as a result of that experience. Scars which aren't always easy to see because they're hidden. They're the emotional scars, the mental scars, the scars that are deep-rooted in one's individual psychology. And it's those scars that continue to exist today for refugees that are here from Ukraine. They're not obvious when you see them talking about their experiences. They're the same for those that have had to make dangerous journeys from Syria today to reach the UK, and 90% of Syrians are not economic migrants. They come here as refugees and they're granted refugee protection, more than 90% of Syrians. The scars that they have, that they hold as a consequence of what they've been through, are absolutely enormous and cannot be underestimated. At the Refugee Council, we are one of the main providers of dedicated therapeutic services for refugees who come to the UK seeking sanctuary and safety in this country. And we know the hidden scars. We know the fact that for many people that come, they don't want to talk about it because it's shameful. In the same way for those that fled Nazi Germany, when they reached safety in the UK, many of them didn't want to talk about it either. The shame of the trauma, the shame of the anxiety, the shame of the post-traumatic stress disorder that you hold, and as a result of your cultural bearings, you don't know how to deal with. Or perhaps in some cultures, there's no openness about mental health. That is the reality for Syrians, for Iranians, for those people that are fleeing torture, persecution in Afghanistan today. And my final parallel is one that I want to touch on that John talked about. And of course, I want to try and finish on a positive rather than a negative. And that's the parallel of those who are involved in the act of welcoming, the extraordinary act of welcoming. John was welcomed by so many people here in the UK. He talked very movingly about it. Today, Ukrainians are being welcomed by tens of thousands of Britons who have decided to throw open their homes to Ukrainians. There are others in the asylum system, as I speak, stuck in hotels, not knowing what's happening to them because 100,000 are awaiting a decision, 75,000 waiting over 6 months, and tens of thousands waiting over a year. The system is in such chaos that people aren't kept informed about what's happening to their asylum application. And yet they're being welcomed by an extraordinary army of volunteers who go into those hotels, who want to listen to them, who want to befriend them, who want to give them some of the possessions that they need that they were unable to reach this country with. They often arrive with just one pair of shoes or simply the clothes that they're wearing on their back. And I'm not exaggerating when I say that. They're not allowed to keep their mobile phone because it confiscated them by border force when they arrive at Dover or at the UK border. And it's the extraordinary compassion and commitment and dedication of volunteers across the country who want to befriend and work with them, ensure that they have enough clothes, that they have basic toiletries. So the story of the welcoming is a powerful story and one that we must hold on to, because it demonstrates the desire of the British people for a more compassionate response, a response that upholds the UN Convention on Refugees, that of course came into being after the horrors of the Second World War, that upholds the principles of a fair hearing on UK soil, that upholds the principle of the right for an individual to choose sanctuary in a country where they feel they want to, and upholds the important principle of Western nations of sharing the responsibility of refugees and people that are less fortunate than us because they have lost everything. And of course, the final parallel is the ultimate parallel that the website is about, which is about possessions. People that we work with at the Refugee Council bring what they've been able to bring at the last minute. It might be, if they're a Christian, the cross that they have around their neck that they cherish. It might be a piece of jewelry that they've been able to hide and keep on them. It's often a book that they hold dear. It might be a photograph of one of their loved ones, or a photograph that they kept in their wallets that they were able to take with them. And remember, many possessions are confiscated from them. And my final thing is that the most important possession for people often today, rightly or wrongly, is that possession that we take for granted in the UK, called our mobile phone, because that possession enables you or I to contact any relative, wherever they are, at any moment of the day or night, anywhere in the world, and feel an immediate connection, an immediate closeness, an immediate sense of being together with them. And for refugees, that possession, believe it or not, is removed from them when they arrive in the UK. There was a High Court challenge that found that act of taking away mobile phones to be unlawful. And now the UK Border Force, the Home Office, is having to address that. But just let me leave that thought with you, that our system has become so compassionless, so almost cruel and callous, so almost hostile, that it was prepared to withdraw the one possession that enabled an individual to remain connected to their family and their loved ones. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'm Laura Marks. I'm the chair of the Holocaust Memorial Day Trust, and my job to thank you both, Enver and John, for what you said to us. I mean, I was just reflecting on some of the parallels that Enver, you were making about current refugees and previous refugees, and the issues of illegal immigration, separation from family, physical and emotional trauma, the positive of people being welcomed, and losing your possessions, including your mobile phone. And I find it absolutely, I mean, of course, that wasn't an issue when John came into the country. He didn't have mobile phones, which we consider, can't imagine these days. But to lose those contacts that are in there, the trauma of that must be quite astonishing. And in Refugee Week, I particularly want to thank you for, I know you've got 1,000,001 events that you're speaking at this week, Enver, and we're so grateful to you for finding the time for us. And John, thank you again. I know we forever bully you into speaking quicker and quicker, but it's so powerful to hear your story. And thank you so much for sharing it with us again, and for sharing your teddy bear, your special item that you brought with you and that you've hung on to for all these years. We're delighted to have worked with the Jewish Museum of Greece, and I'm particularly particularly lucky to introduce to you Dr. Alexandra Pikiriou, who is a researcher there. The relationship, the partnership that we've had with the Jewish Museum of Greece has allowed us to share untold stories, sharing with Greek audiences the experiences of refugees who came to the UK and bringing the experience of Greek Jews in the Holocaust to us in the UK. So let me hand over now to Alex to hear your story. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone from Athens, Greece. I have to say that we here at the Jewish Museum of Greece, we're really proud of this project. This site does encapsulate our vision regarding Holocaust education as the cornerstone of cultivating and promoting active citizenship. Firstly, I would like to state the obvious. The site makes use of digital tools in the most respectful and elegant way. Second, I would like to highlight the fact that the website is based on some of the museum's most valuable possessions, 2 artifacts donated by Holocaust survivors, Daniel Benamias and Eda de Botton. And last but not least, the website tells us individual stories, exploring different microcosms of the Holocaust, which are important and vital for understanding the complexity of the phenomenon and for revealing the pluralism of individual experiences. The main mission of the JMG is to collect, preserve, and exhibit all elements relating to the history, tradition, and culture of the Greek Jewish communities. We aim at introducing visitors of all ages and nationalities to the diversity of the Jewish heritage of Greece within the context of European history. This international cooperation demonstrates JMG commitment to renewing and upgrading the visitors' experiences in its physical as well as in its digital space. The artifacts of the museum constitute the very heart of the institution. This very website offers the opportunity for the museum to display them to international audience. Needless to say that through these artifacts, we share 2 incredible stories of survival. Daniel Benamias' uniform from Auschwitz unfolds the story of young Dani from Thessaloniki, who managed to avoid the first wave of deportation, but not the second. Dani's family was murdered upon arrival at the Auschwitz-Birkenau camp. His story, as a member of the Sonderkommando, i.e. the Jewish prisoners who were forced to work in the gas chambers and the crematoria, gives us clues as to what was everyday life in Birkenau. The uniform makes us think about the individual survival strategies a prisoner could undertake, but also about the importance of a pocket where one could hide their most valuable possessions in an extermination camp, such as a spoon, an extra piece of bread, or a small cob for the lice. Eda de Botton's knitted socks from Bergen-Belsen unfolds the story of a mother trying to survive in a concentration camp, not only physically, but also mentally, by knitting these socks for her daughter, Reina, who she had to give up for the sake of the child's survival. Eda survived, she returned to Greece and got reunited with her daughter. Their relationship, however, was severely damaged. The socks she had knitted were for a baby, while young Reina Gilberta was a toddler by then. The socks were too small and were never worn. Finally, we would also like to invite you all to explore these extraordinary journeys of survival through their ordinary objects. Thank you.
Hello and welcome from the National Holocaust Centre and Museum, which is based in Laxton, Nottingham. We've been here since 1995 and we have a huge range of artefacts that tell the individual stories of so many people who experienced the Holocaust. Based on what we've already heard, I'm just going to show you just a few of the objects that we selected as part of this particular project and the reasons behind it. We wanted to focus on a huge range of not only geographical, but also types of experiences within the Holocaust. This led us to one untold story, which is that of Julius Feldman. Now, this is Julius's work card. He was born in 1923 in Krakow, and when the Nazis invaded, his particular area within Krakow was turned into a ghetto. And we know about his experience because we not only have his work card, which enabled him to survive and which all his family eventually had. It was so important in terms of having that work card in order to have enough food in order to survive. And we know this because we actually have his diary. So we have his first-hand account from 1939 to 1943. And this is how we present it within the museum. We have it on the very last page. And it's so that our audiences can read the very last line, which is, "How terribly I feel the lack of my beloved father." And one of the questions we pose is, what is it that you can learn from just one sentence of a diary? And just from that one sentence, there's a real sense of him feeling the loss of his family, which he documents earlier on within his diary. And the fact that he's a 19-year-old man looking for that guidance. It also talks about his separation from his family and the fact that they've been deported and he's been unable to say goodbye to them. What we've not been able to show, and what we can't show in a museum, is both sides of the documentation. So for example, in terms of the diary, actually on the outside, we've got a map of Poland, and we can see that actually Julius has drawn on arrows to show the invasion of the German army. And this was a really important story for us to tell, because ultimately, Julius did not survive the Holocaust. We know that he lost his life sometime in 1943. We don't know exactly when, but for us, it's his testimony, his ability to share his story and his experiences of parts of resistance, hope, but also seeking justice for what has happened to him during his life. Now, in terms of other artifacts you will see within the website, we've also selected Julie's experience, which is actually a refugee experience. She was born and raised in Austria, and her family was really, really well known. They were within the carpet business, and her family were very, very keen for her to become a refugee and move to England. Now, in order for her to do that, she had to marry somebody, and the marriage did not last. But because she was able to marry somebody and change her name, she came to England, and with her, she brought many objects, which you can actually see on the table. So this is actually an ID card that belongs to Julie, so we know what she looks like and all those key details about her and her life. But we have some really beautiful objects, including this absolutely precious jewelry box that she brought with her. And this gives us an insight in terms of her pre-war Jewish life. So for example, she brought with her a chess set and a number of medals, which she would often play with her dad as part of a local club. She was very good at it. And it gives us an insight into terms of what she was bringing with her to the UK. It's not just that she's starting a new life without her family, it's that she's bringing those memories of her family, of her younger life, in order to remember them. We have a pair of opera glasses in which we are able to say about her culture. And very interestingly enough, I suppose this is another question to actually pose to you as well. We have 3 mezuzahs that actually Julie brought with her to this country. And what's incredible about this collection, there's much more as you'll see on the website, is that this story has actually been pieced together, back together, because these objects came to us and we've been able to retell the story through her artifacts. Julie did not share her testimony, but it's through her objects and what she decided to bring with her that we were able to tell her story and her family's story, because her and her brother survived, but unfortunately the rest of her family did not. I'd like to pass over to Alex now, who's going to show you the microsite that we are incredibly proud of, that shows a number of our different artifacts. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Sarah. It's amazing to see the objects in their actual museum setting today. Thank you for bringing them out like that. That's brilliant. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alex Blake. I'm Senior Education Officer for Holocaust Memorial Day Trust. As Sarah said, what I'm going to do is share my screen and give you a tour of the website today. So I hope you can see that now on your screen. I'm not going to show you everything because we don't have the time, but also I want you to go and explore it yourself. But I'm going to give you an idea of how the navigation works and the kind of content that you can find here. So here we have the homepage. If you haven't yet visited, the URL is ooej.org.
Observational style task and a competency-based.
Sorry, someone has come off mute.
It's almost like you've got.
So I can hear you, but I'm just scrolling down the homepage here to show you that the way that the website is laid out gives you 3 different options for entry points into all of this content. It's organized by people, object, or journey. So users immediately have agency in terms of choosing what they're most interested in as their starting point, and all of these stories can be viewed in any order going through these. So I'm going to start by going in via people. As you'll have gathered from the other speakers today, we focus here on 4 different people. They provide us with a diversity and range of different experiences during the Holocaust, covering different countries of Europe, and with very different stories to tell. If I click here on Julie, who we've just heard about from Sarah, that takes us to her person page. And as we scroll down, we can see a lot of the information that Sarah gave us about her story laid out here, but it's also interspersed with some of the artifacts as well. And where you see a cross here, if you click on it, you get a bit more information. So this is the ID card, and this here is a translation of the categories and also of the information that she's put in there to give us a bit more information about her. As we scroll down, we receive her story in sort of bite-sized chunks. We've kept the website relatively text light. The website is designed to be used alongside other Holocaust materials, so we don't always give the full context of what the Holocaust was. We're very much focusing on these 4 people and their stories and what happened to them. Because of that, as we go through, we're trying to keep the text sort of accessible and short, but where there are words that may need defining, if you click on a word that's underlined, you get this glossary function and you'll be able to see that definition there as you go through, just to help people who are maybe newer to the content as well. At the bottom of any page, you're then given lots of different options of where to go next. So from Julie's person page, highlighted are Julie's object page and her journey. And if you keep scrolling down, you could then just move on to a different person page and learn about a different person as well. So again, we're giving the user lots of flexibility and agency to go through the site in the way that they wish. I'm going to take us to Julie's object page. And obviously you've just had the privilege of seeing these objects in the museum in 3 dimensions. And we wanted to show you the way that they're shown in a museum and the way that they're shown on the website as a deliberate thing to do today. We've photographed the objects very beautifully, as you can see here, and they're laid out very nicely. You can see lots of different angles on them here. The whole page is quite dynamic. Things kind of appear and come in as you scroll down. You get information about why these particular objects were precious and important to Julie, why she brought them. You can see she brought lots of family photographs, and where the information exists about who these people are, we've shared that as well. Where the information isn't clear, we've also been transparent about that. But what I really want to take you down to is the 3D imaging that this website provides. So you saw the mezuzah in Sarah's presentation. And what you can do here is zoom in and move around, spin the object. You can look at it from all different angles. You can zoom right in on the detail here and see the carving. You can look at the underneath of the objects. So it really gives you a sort of different experience to being in the museum itself, because in a museum display, you can only see the side that's presented to you. You can't see underneath. You can't go right in and look close up at the detail, because so many of these objects are precious and fragile. It's difficult to achieve that. So we wanted this website to provide a different way of interacting with these artifacts. Some of the artifacts have a bit more information. Again, if you click on the numbers, you'll receive a little bit more information there. And on Julie's page, we have several of these objects that have been 3D imaged in this way. Here is the jewelry box that Sarah showed you. Any of these you can make full screen. And again, just move around, get all of this incredible detail. You can even go inside the jewelry box here and really get a sense of the materials, the carving, the way these things are put together. So that we think is something quite special on this website. I'm going to go now to Julie's journey page just to give you a full overview of the way that the different pages work. So that should be loading now. So when you first arrive on a journey page, it shows you the full journey is mapped out here. And then as you scroll down this column on the right, as you come to the different sections of the story, the map zooms into that place and you get more information about what happened at that place, why the person was at that place, how they got there, and what's going on in their story. You can see that across the 3 pages, images are repeated and some information is repeated at different levels of detail. That's because we want people to have the flexibility to go through these pages in whichever order they're most interested in and get the relevant information that they need on each page. So there is a little bit of repetition across so that you make sure that you do see the artifacts and so on. So we can see that she comes first to London, then to Leicester, and ends up settling in Scotland. And that's where she spends the rest of her life. So as well as looking at it directly on the map here, if you scroll down, you get the same information laid out in the same way as the other pages as well. And then you have all the same options at the bottom here. I just want to take us back to the home page very briefly and show you a few other pages and functions. We have a project here, a page here that's just got information about the project, what it is, what it aims to achieve, and a few notes for users. We have a resources page. As I said, we're not providing full context of what the Holocaust is and the full story of the Holocaust because this website is so focused. So this is a page where we're signposting where you can find out more. So some specific pages about Greek Jewry, for example, and the Holocaust in Greece. There's a link to purchase Julius's diary if you want to read more from there. There's guidance for using the site to educate about the Holocaust, and a few other options there. If I come back to the home page, down here on the right, there is a little icon of a man figure, a human figure, and that brings up some accessibility options as well. So this site has lots of different ways that you can view it for different accessibility requirements, which we hope will make it very open and easy to use for everybody. So I'm not going to go through them again because of time, but just want to show you sort of what there is within that, and it's quite extensive. Okay. And finally, if we go back down to the people, for the Greek speakers amongst us, there is also the option with the Greek stories to translate the site into Greek, and that's also down here on the right hand side. You can toggle between English and Greek here. Sorry, the Zoom is getting in the way, but there you go. You should be able to see that you can also view those stories in Greek as well. So I am going to stop sharing there and encourage you all to go back to the site. Please do explore it yourself, click on everything, have a look around, and please do share it far and wide. And please do feel free to put any comments in the chat as well. I will now pass back to HMDT Chair Laura Marcs. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Sorry, Laura, you are on mute.
Is that better? Sorry about that. I was just saying that we always give an enormous amount of information in our sessions, but I think we've surpassed ourselves today. So much information, but so beautifully crafted and put together. And thank you all so much to everyone here today. It's been wonderful to see people in the chat we've got from the UK and from Greece, but we've got people from all over the world here today. So welcome, and thank you all so much for coming. Briefly, because we need to finish in 3 minutes, thank you once again to our funders, to the Cecil Rosen Foundation, the Arts Council, to IRA, the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, and to the Leon Greenman Foundation. We really couldn't have done it without you all. And thank you so much for your support and for your belief in this project. Thank you too to our partners in this project. Holocaust Memorial Day Trust has been delighted to partner with the Jewish Museum of Greece and to hear from you. That was wonderful. Rhapsody Media, and Marc, your staff at the Holocaust National Holocaust Centre, and to you for working with us on this project. It's been an absolute pleasure, and we look forward to it soaring and becoming hugely used and hugely popular. Thank you to Emma, who was mentioned at the beginning, but can't thank her enough, for managing the project, to all the staff at both the National Holocaust Centre and also to the Holocaust Memorial Day Trust staff. Also, a final thank you to those people who Marc mentioned, who attended our workshops and helped by giving us feedback and helped to share the site so that we crafted it, because I think you'll all agree it's spectacular. There's so much on there, and it's so well signposted for people to be able to find information in there. I mean, obviously, as we move further and further away from being able to hear from Holocaust survivors themselves, I mean, I'm struck that nobody's even mentioned today that, of course, we're going to have to move to other ways to tell the stories. And these artifacts are crucial. They're going to enable us to tell the stories when people are not there able to tell those stories themselves. So thank you to all the people who helped us shape this, and to all of you in advance who've helped by using the websites and sharing it with your websites, with your networks. Finally, we encourage all of you to use this wonderful new site. It's creative, it's innovative, it's immersive, and we hope that you use it whether you're in schools, museums, city halls, wherever you are. We encourage you to use it with the people you know, both on Holocaust Memorial Day itself, and also year round. You might want to get started now. And it fits so well with our theme this year, which is ordinary people. You know, these are ordinary objects that were used by ordinary people. And we hope that you all will share it with us, get involved, and make sure that Holocaust Memorial Day 2023 is able to tell these stories far and wide. So thank you all so much for coming, and goodbye.